Hi, you clicked on to today's tropical tidbit for Thursday. Over here looking again at the Atlantic, our area of disturbed weather north of Puerto Rico over here has been dubbed Invest 91L by the NHC yesterday, and we continue to see it get a little bit nicer looking over here. We now have a closed low, or nearly closed. It was closed yesterday and last night on the close-up. I'm seeing a lot of south-southwesterlies, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of westerlies or northwesterlies coming out of this right now on the south side. So it's possible that this is opening up a little bit again temporarily. But the models are in great agreement that this will deepen a little bit more today, and we'll probably see this close fully off again and have a nice defined circulation like it has had for the last day or so. It's actually been kind of impressive how nice of a little circulation this developed despite all the shear over it. If we look at the water vapor, here's the upper low to the west of it, still backing southwest slightly, not going to get much farther south. Here's the boundary of the main jet stream over here. Surface flow is a little bit somewhere in here. It's starting to get just north of the heavy jet axis. There's a major gradient between the wind speeds at 200 millibars. South of here it's just screaming 70, 80 knots or more in the upper atmosphere. Up here, not so much. And the wind shear directly over the center of this thing is starting to lessen, and once it lessens in a hurry. The models are initializing 70 to 80 or more knots of vertical wind shear over the center of this thing this morning, and some of that isn't too believable. Looking at satellite estimated upper winds here, we've got about 50 or so knots of upper wind to 200 millibars near or just south of where the surface flow is, and then north of it immediately cools down to 20 to 30 knots of northerly wind, and the surface flow itself is moving north-northwest at about 10 knots. So on the south side of the system where it's dry, it's definitely racing across with 50 to 60 knots of wind shear, a little bit more. But right over the center and north of it immediately, the wind shear is only down between 20 and 30 knots, and that definitely makes a lot of sense. Given the satellite appearance of this, definitely doesn't look like a system getting a complete clean shave by 80 knots of shear, because 80 knots of shear directly over it would be giving it a clean shave. The reality is right now it's had thunderstorms trying to build around its center from the beginning for the last 24 to 36 hours, and this is not the look of a system that is getting utterly destroyed, but rather one that is trying to develop, although it's not going to get very far, because as this backs away, this trough is going to be digging into the plains at some point during the next couple of days, and as this ridge moves to the east, this is going to be forced back towards the southwest as the upper low moves to the east, and at that point it will be forced to try to sustain itself over the water, and it won't be able to do a great job at that without baroclinic support from the upper low, and it will likely weaken. And that's what the models are showing for this right now. It sort of moves a little bit northwest for the next couple of days and then slides back towards the southwest, and all the models down here weaken it as it does come southwest. Even the Canadian now has backed off, which makes a lot more sense. Glad it's finally come back into the realm of reality over here. But up until the point where it starts moving back towards the southwest, it's going to be strengthening and deepening underneath the upper low, and it'll be interesting to see how far we get this. Now, the big question with these subtropical systems that we always have is when do you name it and when do you not? It's hard to think about classifying a system which has so much shear over it, but the wind shear is something that should be considered for potential impact on the future forecast and perhaps impeding its development in the future, but it shouldn't really have any effect on the decision of what it is now. And the criteria that are currently written down for a subtropical cyclone are the main ones: that it's non-frontal, and then it has at least some tropical characteristics, so that it is a hybrid of both extratropical and tropical cyclones. We can agree that it has a significant baroclinic part, and the tropical part comes from the fact that it's got thunderstorms that have been trying to develop over its center for the last 24 to 36 hours. They're getting sheared off, but they continue to try to develop over the center, and it's been along nearly 26 Celsius water for the last 24 hours, and that argues that it has been trying to become shallow warm core. You can see that a little bit on the cross-section from the satellite sensors, although I'm not sure how much I trust this, given that over here it really should be a lot colder than it's showing given the upper low to the west of the system, so I'm not sure how much I trust the accuracy of this math. You can make a little argument based on it for warm core, but it's not going to be real strong of a warm core, so it's hard to prove that. All the models initialize it as warm core, but it's hard to know the true accuracy of that. The problem with this is based on written criteria. If this low were to close off again like it was yesterday, it technically met the requirements to be called a subtropical cyclone, and with gales in the north quadrant, it technically could have deserved a name. But of course the NHC has the ability to make subjective calls, and their written criteria are not very defined and leave room for subjective stuff that has caused disagreements among forecasters before about certain things that get named, certain things that don't. It's always an interesting debate to see which one of these things deserve a name and which don't. But we'll see how this goes, see whether the NRC considers classifying this. Based on the time of year and the shear over it, they're probably not going to be too keen on giving this a name, but we'll see how it goes. At any rate, it's very interesting to see meteorologically at this time of year, and no threat to anyone over here, but hopefully brings a shower or two to some of the folks down here as it backs southwest over the next several days. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.